Well, welcome to Tuesday night, everybody. It's Dr. Boz here, and we have a great case and lesson for you tonight. 1 week ago, this 38-year-old young mother of 3 kids starts on the ketogenic diet, and she does everything right. She is 3 days into the sardine fast, which in her case is going to last 4 days, and these are her blood pressures. My answer is, you need to see a doctor. You need to see a physician right now. Welcome to the show, everybody. We're going to have a great lesson tonight about what happens when you're on a ketogenic diet. How well can we predict those that are going to have some struggles? What would I do when high blood pressure and the ketogenic diet, especially on a sardine challenge, happens? What do we do the first 48 hours? What happens at about a week in? And then what are the long-term plans for folks with high blood pressure on a ketogenic diet? Welcome to the show, everybody. I am in a sardine challenge myself, and I will show you that my blood sugar, probably one of the best it's been on the show for a while, and the ketones are 3.8. I am not done with the sardine challenge. The sardine challenge starts with a can of sardines, and I started on Sunday at about 2 o'clock. I had 2 cans yesterday. I've only had 1 can today. I probably should have another one, but they're getting a little harder to eat, even for me. So we will finish out tomorrow. If you've done a sardine challenge, you know that it ends, that on the 72nd hour is when you get to do the final can of sardines, and we will definitely be celebrating that in the classroom. We are in the second week of our 21-day challenge, and I will tell you, it's one of my favorite things, not just because I love teaching, I love watching patients have light bulb moments about when they're learning about their health, but I learned something. So as I was preparing for today, we went through a case, and we're going to use a little bit of that case tonight in our show, but then we're also going to review some things that I really meant to say out loud this morning in a case, but I got very involved in education and answering the questions for the students. So we're going to use that for tonight. It is a full life during the 21-day challenge, and I am not making excuses, but I'm definitely happy to repeat the lesson from this morning here on the show. So let's get started and show you a little bit about what happened in not just the sardine challenge, but what happened with this lady who is, again, a student saying, you know, I really should take care of some of the things in my health better. In fact, one of the parts of her story is that her husband said, what would it take for you to take the class? And she's like, I'm willing. And again, we are a week into class, and I was actually expecting to teach today about orthostatic pressures, and which means you check blood pressure when you're standing up, you check blood pressure when you're sitting, and then you check blood pressures when you're lying down. And so as gravity gets to be less, the pulse can get a little lower. And the difference between the pulse when they're standing versus lying helps us to say how much salt should you be taking. Well, that turned out not to be the lesson at all today. Leave it to the patient to say, I left her a message saying, I want you to check your blood pressure with your home cuff. I know you've been struggling with this. Let me take a look at those pressures. So when she types in the notes that say, boy, that is really high blood pressure. And again, that's a really, and then it got worse the more nervous she got. And well, thankfully her neighbor came along and said, you might want to get some help. When she finally got to the ER, again, those pressures were not fantastically better. They were a little bit better. And by the time she showed up to class this morning, we had some teaching to do. So let's start, first of all, by reviewing what happens in the blood vessels of somebody with high blood pressure. Many people watching this have this. They take medications for it. And I will remind you, as well as the student from today, that what really happens over time when you have high blood pressure is that this layer right here, which is the muscle, this muscle gets thicker and thicker and thicker and thicker in every one of the arteries. So that by the time they are seeing us, and again, this woman's 38 years old, she's probably had high blood pressure for a decade. and her muscle layer is probably this thick now. Instead of being this thick, it's probably twice that, because inside her body, that pressure, and I went through this as I was teaching the class, saying, how you have lub and dub when you listen to your heart rate? That lub is pushing the blood forward, and the dub is when your heart is filling with fluid. But both of them have a pressure. And when you look at this gal's blood pressure, let me just go back to this slide here. When you look at her blood pressure, the lub is the 170, the dub was 140, the lub was 165, the dub was 100. So as her body is relaxing, that pressure that she has her heart under is still massive. And as a result, the compensation inside every artery is to have a thickening of the muscle wall. And I tried describing it earlier as, how if you have a tight shoulder muscle and you take the thumb and you really try to have somebody massage that out, go get a good massage. They even put an elbow in it, and that can relax the muscle. But it almost always comes back within 48 hours if the cause of that muscle was poor posture, using the mouse at the computer too much. The contraction of that muscle will return. And although she tried to meditate her way out of this high blood pressure, it was midnight when she was in the emergency room and saying, yeah, I don't think this is a good idea. Let me just go through this here. Yeah, endothelial lining we talk about as the inner coating of the tunnel that goes through your arteries. That's a really important one as we talk about C-reactive protein. Oops, I gotta get my head out of the way there. The elastin membrane is also what recoils and returns that the artery to its original shape. But this is what we're caring about, is the muscle layer. And what this woman at 38 years old has is a very high musculature that has been happening for years, that she comes to our class, and I contend that she didn't have this high blood pressure problem in a hot minute. She has had this high blood pressure for a while. We're going to show you a couple things that help me be confident of that. But I want everybody who has high blood pressure, if you could make a guess, what do you think is the number one lab? I'm going to give you the facts about the lab, and then I'm going to teach you about the lab. As I teach you about the lab, hopefully you get the answer right eventually. This is the first lab that turns abnormal when high blood pressure is starting to cause damage in the body. You can measure it a decade before their EGFR, or their estimated glomerular function, estimated kidney function, turns to the numbers where doctors say, hey, you've got some chronic kidney disease. So it's a decade ahead. I mean, that is such a lead time for patients when they wonder, did that blood pressure cause any problems? What is the one lab that I called the student and said, I know you're going to go see your doctor today. Please have them add this lab on. It predicts mortality rate. It predicts MACEs, major adverse cardiovascular events, whether that's a stroke, a near heart attack, a sudden cardiac death, high blood pressure. If you've been to this channel or any medical channel, chronically elevated blood pressure is no joke. This lady's is way too high. We're going to show you what the ketogenic diet can do to help somebody with high blood pressure, but we're also going to cover what is the number one lab that should be being checked. Okay, I'm totally reading these off of here, saying insulin is not it, creatinine is not it, potassium is not it, fasting insulin, nope. Nobody has guessed it yet. A CAC score, LP(a), HSCRP, none of those are right. Mine's been high for 30 years. No, that's not a good idea. All right, you guys are still guessing. I still don't see the right answer. AST is a liver enzyme. That is not the predictor. Uric acid is one of my favorites. I think we're going to have a lecture on that in class tomorrow. All right, I want you to continue. I'm going to scroll back through these answers in a minute while I continue to teach this lesson, because I think it's worth it to say, here's what we do know. All right, so here's a hint. I'm showing you the kidney section because it has everything to do with what this lab, where this lab is measured. For the record, I'm watching the comments and nobody has guessed it yet. All right, so yeah, just to kind of outline the anatomy, this is your kidney. let's do this in white actually. This is your kidney. This is the ureter where the urine is collected and drained from the kidney, and this is the bladder. So in that, in this image here with the arrow, it has it's just sliced in half so you can see what the inside of the kidney looks like. If we would dial in, this section right here is blown up to this section here, where you can see the red, I'm going to put the red one here, the red blood, the arterial blood comes in here, and this is an artery and a vein here. But also something really magical is happening right there in that yellow spot. This is called a glomerulus. So the glomerulus is now here. Actually, I probably should put that in yellow just so you can see that. Glomerulus is here. And again, it's a much better picture. This is really important for you to understand what's happening inside your kidney. This blood is needing a filter. It needs filtered. The job of the kidney is to do that. It comes into the blood supply here. It dives into this this little ball of capillaries, and throughout the miracle of all these beautiful cells in your kidney, you will find urine is produced, and then it drains out through your ureter and your bladder. Okay, so hang in here with me. Why am I so adamant about this? Because there are two things that enter, I'm going to use these white dots here, two things that enter the space in this capillary refill. One of them is a protein called albumin. And although the dots look really small there, I'm just going to make a couple of them where when the albumin, which is a protein, should not leak from one side of from the blood side to the urine side. But if we get if we get an albumin, especially microscopic albumin inside the urine, it is a signal that the barrier between these two has been cracked. And what cracks that? You guessed it, high blood pressure. So that microalbumin is one part of this test. That's not quite the answer yet. And I'm really watching to see if anybody, albumin in the urine, Thomas said that. I'm looking to see if anybody actually gets this right. I should have my residents or my med students here participating too. So there's the albumin, but the other part of this, I'm going to use blue for this, is creatinine. And creatinine is a waste product that is meant to go into the urine. So you can just see the X's here are the creatinine. They go into the urine, and now you have a ratio. And I'm going to write this out loud. So if you haven't guessed this, it is an albumin to creatinine ratio. There's somebody who did it. Raquel Mireles I don't know how to say your last name. I'm sorry. Let's do the chat so everybody can see it. He typed it in there. Good job. It is an albumin to creatinine ratio. It's actually a microscopic albumin to creatinine ratio. What the slides are hopefully doing is showing you what this test measures. So the microalbumin is in the urine, so it measures that. That's measured in milligrams, albumin. And then in the bottom is the urine creatinine. So this is a urine test where we take the particulates of the urine and we look at how many are in there relative to one another. It should always be less than 30. It should always be less than 30. And when it is greater than that, it is a canary in the cave. When I called this gal before she went to see her doctor to get her medications, to lower this blood pressure, because I don't care how much you trust the ketogenic diet, that is not the first step here. We have waited far too long to have pressures that high in this woman, that she needs this test done. And what I'm confident of is that when she gets her microalbumin to creatinine ratio done, she will learn how damaged are her kidneys. That microalbumin in the urine, microalbuminuria, especially the one that's in the microalbumin to creatinine ratio, it is the earliest marker of kidney disease. It is best done when it's the microalbumin to creatinine. And again, these are both measurements in the urine, microalbumin to creatinine ratio. We always want that less than less than 30 is what the test says, but less than 20 is what I even use that. In fact, many of you know that my dad had kidney failure at the end of his life and was on peritoneal dialysis. And when we were in the throes of trying to find out what the source of it was, I got to go back through his medical records, and he had a microalbumin to creatinine ratio that had elevated a decade, just like I said, a decade before the problems were apparent in his life. And use this as a public service announcement. Physicians, it is on the lab panels. It's cheap, it's nothing, and it's going to be normal until it's not. But what this gal also gets the benefit of is, as she's able to measure that today, what I promise her is, if she stays the course in what we're teaching her in this class, she is going to find some relief. She is going to find this number return to normal, because kidneys do forgive. They do repair. They don't do it as fast as I wish they would. So again, in 48 hours on the ketogenic diet. So the first 48 hours after seeing this, what I cared about was not what her ketones were, not what her blood sugar was, but who her doctor was, and whether or not the doctor was writing a medication to get these blood pressures down. Far too high for this young mother to have this high of pressures, and we will help her to stay focused on that. But what happens over the course of the 7 days on a ketogenic diet is something that I think this is classic. This is standard. I could have written this chart out for this woman had she never showed me any of her blood sugars. She started checking her blood sugars right here. I'm going to use the blue here, right here. And you'll notice that that's September 10th. We started class on the 8th, so September 10th was Wednesday. And on the 10th, you see this dotted line here is the blood pressure or the blood glucose of 100. So her blood sugars were above 100, above 100. Oh, finally on September 12th, which is Saturday, was the first time they dipped below 100. We're now 6 days into dropping her carbs. What I can tell you is that her ketones at the same time were very low. And it's okay, we're gonna help her. Here is the one marker for the ketones. So getting above 1, big moment in this woman's metabolism, and it allows me to start to see, when does her insulin drop? She's never measured her insulin. She checked her hemoglobin A1C and it was normal at 5.1. So she's like, I don't think that's a problem. All of my labs look really good. In fact, she did get her blood drawn in the emergency room last night. And I talked to her earlier, right before the show, where she says, yeah, it says my kidney function is all normal. I'm like, please get this test done. Please get this test done. You've already given them urine. They can check it. It is a wonderful thing, not for me to follow, but for her to follow. When this is less than 30, your kids' mom is going to be less likely to have a major adverse cardiovascular event. And she has a family history of folks struggling with insulin resistance, becoming diabetic, having trouble with weight. And I'm here to say, you can break the cycle. You can break the cycle. So she shows up, this is on day 2, and she has, again, ketones of 0.2. Here she made it to, ketones of 0.4. It wasn't until here that where she almost got to like 0.7. And I had a conversation with her saying, we're supposed to start this sardine challenge on Sunday, but I'm going to have you start a day early. I'm going to need you to start a day early. She'd already said, I have the high blood pressure, but I haven't checked it yet. And I don't know, there's some sort of intuition that said, you're going to want to start early. Please start early. So as she starts early, I want you to first see that the blood sugars dropped below 100. And then by the first 24 hours into the sardine challenge, where all she's eating is sardines, as much as she wants, I think she ate 3 or 4 cans, which is perfect. She now has a blood sugar that's in the 80s. I think it was 88 here. And her ketones are still 0.6, so not bad, but way better than they're off the floor at least. And then she wakes up the next morning on the 15th, and today, the 16th, she has a ketone of 1.8, and she has a glucose that is, I think it was 84 or something like that. So again, really good numbers by the end of the first week. And what can I conclude? Oh, that she's dropped her insulin. What in the tar does this have to do about blood pressure? Everything. As you watch what that high insulin state has done for this woman, she has had a higher glucose in circulation. That glucose, I mean, it's elevated. I know that the first few times she checked it, it was between 100 and 120. And I will guarantee, I will bet money that the blood sugars the week before she started dropping those carbohydrates, was even higher. And as she holds on to this excess fluid in her body, I spent all this time showing you that her Dr. Boz ratio, we'll put the Dr. Boz ratio in. Dr. Boz ratio finally got to, actually I should not do math on live television. Here's what the Dr. Boz ratio is. It went down, which means her insulin went down. What happened to her blood sugar when her insulin went down? Well, remember, she's insulin resistant. So when she is having those blood sugars knock on the cells of her heart, of her brain, of her muscles, they can't get in because the insulin is less. She's insulin resistant, and she requires a lot of screaming of the insulin at the cells to let the blood sugar into the cells. And I just said, I dropped that. So what does that mean? That means her cells are kind of starving. They don't have a fuel around. And for those first few days where those ketones were coming off the floor from that 0.2, 0.3, we got to 6. And then finally on the second day of the sardine challenge, she has enough ketones to percolate in her brain and to go throughout her body. But it was at the same time she's eating only sardines. She now has a blood sugar of 88, which is, yes, it's lower than it's been. So you think, is that why her cells are starving? No, her cells are starving because they're insulin resistant, and they are dependent on that high insulin to scoop those glucose into her cells and satisfy their hunger. But it took till that second day of the sardine challenge. Oh, no, third day. Today is Tuesday. So Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Fourth day of the sardine challenge. Well, I guess you could say 24 hours in is one day, 48 hours in is 2 days. So we're 72 hours in. She's going to do this again for another day. It took her till 72 hours to get the ketones present high enough to fuel all of these cells. And her cells are gobbling that up. They are using that as fuel, as energy. But in the meantime, she has dropped a bunch of fluid. She has decreased the fluid in her circulation. So whatever her blood pressure was last week, it's definitely better right now. It's definitely better than it was. Again, that does not mean that you ignore that and go get a ketogenic diet saying, I'm going to treat my blood pressure with a ketogenic diet. Not when it's at this level. Let me go back to that slide and say what happens next. All right, so in 6 months, let's talk about what would happen in 6 months to this woman. Ooh, hold on. So if you look at the time of, we've got 1, 2, 3, we've got, this is her starting of her ketogenic diet. We'll do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. What do I expect to happen with the blood sugars? We're going to put the blood sugars in red. As her blood sugars started out with an average around probably 105, let's just say 100, 105. I would expect the average blood sugars for her to be, sorry, hold on. Oh, that doesn't work. Gotta do this way. Sorry. I thought that was the erase button. 80. So we're going to see this gradual slide that morning fasting sugars should get down to 80 by the time she's 6 months in. It will be a lag, meaning you will see that the blood sugars are going to stay here at the 100 mark a lot longer than she will expect. What's happening during that time is the reversal of the insulin resistance. It will be the important time that her blood pressure medicines stay on board. The thickening of those muscles, the contractility of all the muscles lining every artery in her body is not going to relax without help from a medication. And it is not 1800, it is 2025, and we can do that for this woman in hopes that none of her end organs like brain, heart, and kidneys have long-term effects from this chronic high blood pressure. The next thing we're going to look at is the ketones. And I would usually draw ketones in blue, but we're going to draw ketones in yellow. So if we had ketones over here that start at 0.5, 1.0, 2.0, and let's even go to 3.0. I will tell you that over the course of these next couple of weeks, her ketones are going to be averaging 2.5 to 3. Like, it will be a lot. When she gets done with this class, she's going to have a bunch of ketones in circulation. And her Dr. Boz ratio will be awesome, and the class will end, and then she'll go to her support group and say, what the heck happened? What happened to my ketones? Her body will adapt. And so over the course of the next couple of months, it's going to come back down to a 1 or lower, at which point we're going to get her attention, because this will be also a time that her blood pressure is going to have a difficult time, because it is that Dr. Boz ratio. It is the lowering of the insulin that we need to keep helping her work at. And her body has been making that elevated insulin for a long time. Then, in the event that she continues to give her mitochondria a workout, give her metabolism a workout, I would contend that those average ketone numbers are going to land back up around 2. Now, that is a wonderful chart. That is absolutely what I would ask any student to do in the course of kind of reversing high blood pressure problems over the next 6 months. Ideal worlds don't show up in most human beings that aren't, in a support group, keeping track of their blood sugars, and of course, watching what those blood ketones are doing, all in the hopes that this part right here, this thickening of the muscle, is under less tension. That the remodeling of those arteries can happen as long as that Dr. Boz ratio stays at least under 80. I would love it if it's under 40 in somebody who's this insulin resistant. That's going to be really hard for her on month 2 and 3. But during that time, if we can teach her a few tricks that she's going to learn in the class, and the medications should also help to remodel that thickened muscle into a less thickened muscle. And boy, oh boy, have we got a longevity extender if she can get that blood pressure back down to normal. And then by the grace of God and the ketones flowing in her circulation, it would be my goal that she gets off of those medications. Again, endothelials there, you're going to see elastin here, and it is the most important one for this lesson is that muscle layer. I expect those to all remodel over the course of the next few months to weeks to months. It's going to take a good 6 to 8 weeks to start that remodeling. The number of ketones, the glucose, and looking at that Dr. Boz ratio, so looking at them in combination, are going to be a really powerful answer to whether or not she has done that. So let me just recap this. The purpose of this lecture was not to say all things about high blood pressure, but to show you this is really common. Patients write in all the time saying, "Doc, can I treat this high blood pressure with a ketogenic diet?" The answer is yes. This woman has hope that we will get her off medications, that she can remodel that body. She is young. She is 38 years old. To reverse this process is going to take the lowering of that glucose, the rise of those ketones, and then despite the metabolic resets that her system is going to go through, she keeps her eye on the game by challenging her metabolism and never going weeks on end without that burst in ketones, drop in glucose, and of course the remodel of that muscle layer that's probably really like a shoulder muscle, really tight and knotted up throughout her arteries. All right, we are going to take questions. My team is looking at the questions that you all are putting in. So especially if it's got to do about blood pressure or microalbumin to creatinine ratio, I would love to answer that. I do have a mistake that we made that you guys do get to take advantage of. I swear I do this way too much, but here's the reality of being a really good doctor and an okay supplement, keeping track of my supplements. So I did this wonderful thing. Let's go to this, Dr. Boz shop. I did this wonderful thing about making products that either my family or the people I care about can take. And I made beef liver a couple years ago. And unfortunately, the beef liver had an expiration date that I lost track of. And the expiration date is this month. So it is a fire sale on iron beef liver. If you have ever tried to replace iron in your body, this is how I would have you first do it, by eating chicken liver every day. But most people won't do that. I mean, I can barely get them to eat sardines. Chicken liver, even harder to figure out how to eat in a way that doesn't ruin my palate. But beef liver, this beef liver is freeze-dried beef liver. It keeps the nutrients and specifically the hemoglobin-surrounded iron. For anybody who's ever been iron deficient, super important for brains and development, super important for folks who are trying to repair a malnourishment, whether that's a hair loss or the chronic consequences of I'm going to put in air quotes here, leaky gut or a gut permeability issue where they're losing more iron than they're absorbing. Putting a beef liver into your menu is really important. The other part that I know I'm going to end up doing is if these don't all sell, I'm going to feed them to my dog. If you ever had a dog with a malnourishment, eating that dog food is not a good idea. If you're looking for supplements for it, you are never going to find a price that's better than these beef liver capsules. It's freeze-dried beef. It's really high quality beef. I messed up and the expiration date is in like a hot minute. They don't go bad. I mean, my family and I are going to be the ones eating them if you don't, but great for pets and the price is right. All right, let's go back to here and I am going to look for the questions that are, oh, they're coming in. It looks nice. Here we go. So we're going to answer a few of these questions. I am going to probably end the show a little earlier than usual. So I'll answer these questions because it is a full schedule with the 21 day. And I am happy to use this case to teach through, but I am also, well, I'm not done working for the day. I will be visiting classrooms yet tonight. So let's get over and look at those questions. Here we go. Steph writes in and says, sugar has damaged kidneys, causing high blood pressure. Okay, let me restate that. I think what you're saying is that, was it the sugar that damaged the kidney and caused the high blood pressure? It did both things. Yeah. The elevated blood sugar. Actually, let's just back this up. This is a young woman, 38 years old. And again, I suppose young gets younger every year I get older, but young woman, 38 years old, whose blood sugar is not abnormal yet. Her average blood sugar is like 105. Her hemoglobin A1C, just checked last night in the emergency room, is 5.1. That means the average glucose that she has is really well controlled. But you only have to look at her to know, uh-oh, I've seen that shape before. I've seen this profile before where she has insulin resistance written all over it. Meaning the way she puts on weight did not show up last week. She has been putting on weight for a long time. You hear stories of her dad being over 400 pounds, mom having type 2 diabetes, and she has the genetics for a really runaway train for making insulin. And she's been doing that since her early 20s. So at least 18 years of making excess insulin. And that excess insulin has caused a chronic inflammatory state inside her body. The blood sugars aren't high yet. It is the shift in blood sugars that are going to change some of, the shift in insulin that's going to change whether or not those blood sugars can enter into a cell. I have a really good slide of this, but I'm not going to be able to find during a live show, where you look at how many sugars are trying to get into a muscle cell on the first week of a ketogenic diet. And they're knocking on the muscle cell saying, hey, I want in. But just like this gal, the amount of insulin that must be present in order to lift those glucose in is super high. And we lowered the insulin by putting her on a ketogenic diet. So she's in this middle spot and she is going to suffer. Her cells are going to be crabby until the ketones show up, which is what showed up yesterday and today. Today, 1.8. So really good number today. It's going to be even better tomorrow. This is the footprint that will say, okay, I can predict what's going to happen in the next 5 days for this patient. I've seen it thousands of times. Had I known her blood pressure was this high when we started, I could have predicted this part too. In fact, as high as those blood pressures are, I know with my whole heart that they're better than they were last week. Yes, they are better than they were last week. So, which is why she's checking a microalbumin to creatinine ratio. All right, let's go back next. So I think I answered that question. Go to here. And so Lisa C says, what would you have done if the ratio was off before the hypertension set in? Like her albumin to creatinine ratio was off, or the Dr. Boz ratio? What would you have done if the ratio was off before high blood pressure set in? Okay, so I'm going to answer this in both ways. What would I have done if the albumin to creatinine ratio was off before the high blood pressure shows up in the clinic? I would have said, check her blood pressure at night. She must have sleep apnea. Again, seen it too many times. Biggest raise of blood pressure is silent when they're sleeping. So they're holding their breath. Their blood pressures are going sky high, like 250 over 190 while they're sleeping, which is why some people die of sleep apnea from the high blood. I mean, they die in their sleep from high blood pressure, and they'll say death was sleep apnea. What was the real death? It was a heart attack. They didn't have enough oxygen, and the pressure that heart was under is off the charts. I'll answer the question so what would I have done? I would have completely looked for sleep apnea, It's sleep apnea until proven otherwise. And then, of course, I'd have put her on the ketogenic diet while treating the sleep apnea, while treating the blood pressure, while getting her oxygen at night. And so then what would I have done if the Dr. Boz ratio, I don't think it makes sense the other way. I just wasn't thinking right. Okay, let's do the second one. And it is just for kids. Oh, she showed up early today too. I got to talk to her before the live started. Could use of exogenous ketones like BHB or MCT to get ketones back up and the Dr. Boz ratio down? So when her blood pressure came down and stays down. So yeah, the use of the exogenous ketones in a person like this, in a student like this, start with, as you saw me write out that chart. Let's see if I can find it again. I bet you it's gone. Where the over time that glucose is coming down, but the ketones are really good. They're going to dip before they come back up. And it's in that dip where you absolutely want to help them hack their way through this. When she swallows ketones, when put ketones in a can or put MCT oil back in her diet, as long as she's keeping the carbohydrates low, it doesn't have to be perfect, because I get that you're in a valley because it wasn't perfect, but you can't be eating chocolate cake while having BHB and expect them to do as much as I want them to do. They're expensive. I want them to work, and I want you to get out of the ditch as quick as possible. When you put exogenous ketones in the circulation of somebody like this, when that valley happens, when the ketones are up here pretty good, but they're going to dip before they come back up to where they should be. Super hack. The circulation of ketones in her body, just like right now, like her body is circulating ketones. They were made by her liver. They came from an incredible stress that, despite her best efforts, she has never been able to get this level of stress and boost those ketones to this level while dropping the glucose. She's tried, but she has never had this kind of success. And as she rattles that signal throughout her body that, ketones are in circulation, it's because resources coming through her mouth are lesser than they've been in the past. And in this situation, the resources I'm talking about are glucose. She has dropped that glucose to 0 during a sardine challenge. And her body's like, what? Well, you just changed the rules on us. Where's all the sugar you've been putting in for? And in her case, it's not even a lot of sugar, but it's enough to perpetuate her insulin resistance. So by dropping that, the body has signals, we need a different fuel. Make the backup fuel called the ketone. And those mitochondria inside her liver are churning out ketones in an amazing way. Like, they are hitting it out of the park. They'll be better tomorrow. They'll be better on Thursday. And then they'll adapt. And that's when ketones in a can are really helpful. By putting ketones in, especially in the afternoon, in the time where I want her to restrict eating the most is in the afternoon and evening. She has kids, she homeschools, she's got plenty of things to do on her plate. So not eating in those afternoon and evening hours, we got to help her with that. So having ketones in a can, put ketones in the body and it signals to the body. Yes, it will be energy. Yes, they'll feel a little better, especially when they've been keto. When they add ketones in a can, it settles the cravings. They do well. But on a chemistry level, it signals to the liver, resources are low. Resources are low because we're making ketones. So the ketones in circulation that came from drinking the ketones in a can signal those mitochondria in the liver to make more ketones. And that is the way that you get them out of the ditch the quickest. The biggest sabotage that I would have for this gal is that she goes in that valley and she just can't boost out of it. She's going to need to stress her metabolism again. And she's going to ride this wave for like 6 weeks. It's going to be beautiful. But then she's going to need to stress her metabolism. And as those ketones start to sink, as it hits the floor, having ketones in the afternoon for 4 or 5 days, 6 days in a row, great time to rally up the troops saying, I need somebody to do another sardine challenge with me. I have to stress my metabolism again. and she will wake up a whole new crop of mitochondria that didn't get awakened this time around, but will be next time around. Yeah, when her blood pressure comes down and stays down, any persistent ketogenic state is going to be a powerful place where not only does she repair that process, but she is able to, meaning that thickening of the muscle, that autophagy of the muscles, but the power for her heart to create a healthy blood pressure, move that blood along without pounding that tar out of that muscle. That's where longevity starts to show up. And that's where the blood pressure medicines will hopefully not be needed forever. And there's a few things I can do to try and predict that, but I'm not going to do that on live television here or live YouTube. All right, Frank writes in and says, what happens if an average blood pressure is 160/100 in a 66-year-old male that's never taken medication? You absolutely need to do the same thing. This is not medical advice, but if that was my blood pressure, I would go to my doctor and be on a medication, because even on a perfect ketogenic diet, you have to remodel the muscle that's around every artery in the body, and that's really the danger of what happens to blood pressure that's been high for that long. Mark S says, can you give us the most important ratio one more time? Yeah, I wonder if I can type it in here. Let's see if you can. I've never done this. I'm gonna go here. Microalbumin, and that is in the urine over the creatinine ratio. This is a urine test, so let me just put a return here. It is a urine microalbumin and urine creatinine ratio. It should always be less than 30. In my patients, I tell them it should be less than 20. Less than 30 is what the goal is. And it is the canary in the cave for if you're having high blood pressure. This is how you prevent that. Annie H writes in and says, would taking ketone salts help the body make ketones faster? Yes, just like I explained in that last one. And then would the salts make the blood pressure higher? Not necessarily. Again, the state of ketosis, it is the most anti-inflammatory state that's out there. When inflammation so if you've ever watched any of our cartoons, when Mr. Insulin is doing the naughty things that insulin does, we have a flame on the top of his head because it is such a high inflammatory state. And when the insulin is normal and not doing angry, there's no flame around him. So when you look at one of the best anti-inflammatory molecules that helps put out the reactive oxygen species, the kinds of consequences of a cytokine storm, of the body's response, over response to inflammation, not the stuff that's healthy where it bursts up and bursts down. This is chronically elevated inflammatory problems like this 38-year-old had and has had for a while. When you put that ketogenic state in place, again, the way she did it this last week is one of the best ways. It will be the fastest reversal we have of a high blood pressure at this level, is not only the ketogenic state, but the weight loss that's going to come with it. The third thing, though, is as you remove those inflammatory goo, like this is the cytokines, this is the elevated C-reactive proteins, it's the markers within the elevated insulin. All of that is helping to keep that blood pressure high. And when you swallow ketones in a can, again, it's the burst of ketones that are going to come after that. It will not solve all your problems. Taking those BHB powders or the ketones in a can do not solve all of the problems, but it rescues you out of the runaway train that chronic inflammatory chemistry will do, which is where those hardened muscles came throughout her arteries and where that high blood pressure really scares the tar out of me and every other medical provider. All right, we're going to call that a wrap. I really appreciate all of the students that are teaching me in the 21-day class. And again, those that showed up, thank you very much. We will see you next week.